Chapter 4. Is it love or infatuation? Love is unquestionably the most abused word in the English language. People love puppies, or they love ice cream. Women commonly close their letters to acquaintances with the word love, as do all relatives when they write to one another. Boys trying to get a kiss from their girlfriends mumble something about love. That's to make the giving easier for the girl. Then there are different kinds of genuine love. A mother loves her 2-year-old baby just as wholeheartedly as she loves her husband, and she loves her husband now just as much as she did as a girl 8 years ago when she fell in love with him. But the love is different. She was more misty-eyed then. She didn't realize it, but the earlier love was heavily flavored by sexual attraction. Now sex is still present in her regard for her husband, but the bond is primarily a deep feeling of comradeship. And with the baby, of course, true sexual feelings are not involved at all. In all 3 of the cases, however, she had developed a deep concern for the welfare of the loved one, and in all 3 of the cases the loved one had similar feelings of attachment to her. Right here you have the gist of true love, whether parental, conjugal, or romantic. Still, it is often difficult to know if your love is the real thing. 2 out of 5 of the girls who come to the Penn State Marriage Counseling Service for advice about their affairs think they are in love, but aren't sure. One girl was really confused. She reported that she was terribly in love with 2 different men at the college. One was on the basketball team. The other played in a campus orchestra. She did not know which one she loved the more, and wanted to be told which to choose. Tests soon established beyond a doubt that she had the warmest kind of physical feeling for both men, but the tests also showed that she was primarily fascinated by them as catches. She wasn't actually in love with either, and was so informed. She was the victim of double infatuation. How can you tell love from infatuation? Dr. Henry Bowman of Stevens College offers these points of distinction. Infatuation may come suddenly, but love takes time. Infatuation can be based on 1 or 2 traits, usually including sex appeal, whereas love is based on many traits. In infatuation, the person is in love with love, whereas in love, the person is in love with another person. In infatuation, the other person is thought of as a separate entity and employed for self-gratification. In real love, there is a feeling of identity with the other person. Infatuation produces feelings of insecurity and wishful thinking, whereas love produces a sense of security. In infatuation, you suffer loss of ambition, appetite, etc., whereas in love, you work and plan to please the other person. The physical element is much more important in infatuation than in love. Infatuation may change quickly, but love lasts. In general, you can be sure that it is really love if it has developed over a period of time, rather if it comes all of a sudden. But you may ask, how about those couples who are meant for each other and fell in love at first sight? Both are nice romantic notions, but both have little validity in fact. There is no one person in the world for anyone. We don't expect happily married couples or happily engaged couples to believe that, but all the evidence indicates it is true. There are hundreds, indeed thousands of people that you could fall in love with and be happily married to, and there are, of course, thousands and perhaps millions of people you would be miserable with as mates. The only sense in which there can be a one and only for you is that there may be only one good prospect within your range of possible acquaintanceship. It is the multitude of good possible mates that sometimes makes it difficult for a girl to choose between 2 men. It is the multitude of possibilities that produces triangular situations after marriages. And it is this multitude of available mates in America that makes it possible for a girl to find and love a man in her own community rather than to have to go from Maine to California to meet a one and only. As for instantaneous love, a girl has about as much chance of falling in love at first sight as she does of becoming Cinderella. At times, couples experience infatuation at first sight, which may or may not later mature into love, and ordinarily the infatuation is based about 80% on sexual attraction. Love at first sight also often occurs when you come across someone who happens to match your fantasy ideal for a mate. If you have always dreamed of a bride with large brown eyes, and a turned-up nose and a shapely figure, and you are ripe for mating, you fall first for the girl matching that description. It is a mighty hazardous way to try to pick a mate. Other people think they fall in love at first sight because they are desperately anxious to have someone to hold to, and clutch at the first person who comes along. They suffer from feelings of insecurity. This was particularly true of girls during the war. One girl who came to the Penn State Clinic was rapturous about her coming marriage to an Army lieutenant stationed temporarily at the college. Why did she love him? She was pretty vague about that, and seemed to resent the question. What did they have in common in the way of interests and ideals? The only thing she could think of was that they both liked to bowl. It was soon developed that she was in love with the idea of getting married. She was 27 and nervous about her future. That she was sincerely convinced she was in love with the man was a tribute to her own powers of self-deception. She realized that she should, in all decency, be in love with the man she was going to marry, and convinced herself that she was. Frequently, two people fall so madly in love soon after meeting that they feel they must marry immediately. This tendency is so well known that most marriage counselors rightfully question if a state of true love exists when the two people feel they will die if they don't get married tomorrow or next week. Real love can wait. It can make sacrifices. It is not something that has to be rushed. The more urgent the desire to get married immediately, the greater the likelihood that it is infatuation, and that the infatuation may die out as abruptly as it sprang into being. But why, you may ask, is love at first sight so improbable? Why can't you fall in love as easily, immediately as you can after weeks of knowing each other? Here we get to the essence of love, which Webster's dictionary defines as desire for and earnest effort to promote the welfare of another. Love is not a trap you fall into. It is a state of respect for and comradeship with another that is developed from the fact that you both have similar tastes, ideals, and yearnings. Such comradeship cannot come as a result of one date. Cynics have said that love is of all feelings the most egoistic and consequently is, when crossed, the least genuine. That assumes love is possessive and selfish. Genuine love, as we understand it today, is the medium through which the fullest development of the personalities of a man and woman may take place, and involves a keen desire for the welfare of the loved person. There is nothing egoistic about real love. Here, briefly, are some conditions that are usually present before love can develop. The two persons have had experience together that have caused each to react favorably to the other. They have each found present in the other qualities, standards, and ideals which they admire. Their sexual feelings have been so favorably conditioned, without their realizing it, that they find great pleasure just in being in each other's presence. Each one in some way fulfills some of the motives that are of importance to the other, such as desire for social approval, or, with a man, mastery. There are many people for whom it is utterly impossible to fall in love. For a few, this is due to physical inadequacy, but to most it is a result of unfavorable conditioning that has made them selfish or afraid of contact with the opposite sex. How does a person get the ability to fall in love? From a physical standpoint, certain hormones pour into the bloodstream of a man or woman past puberty that create sexual tension, but that only starts to explain the complexity of the love relationship. Your ability to fall in love depends for the most part on your own previous experience as far back as childhood. In the beginning, for example, your mother met all your needs. Every time you cried, your mother rushed to you, to feed you, to give you a drink, to change your diaper, or to remove a pin that was sticking in you. Gradually, in your mind, the mother becomes associated with everything pleasant, with eating, the relief of thirst, the elimination of pain. You probably became attached to her with a depth of love and affection that lasted for many years. Similarly, your mother received pleasure from hearing your coos when she gave you relief from pain. She received the approval of your father for bearing you, and the admiring comments on you from the neighbors, and she satisfied her motive of mastery by having something, you, under her control. Her love deepened for you. It has been observed in the South, where the nursemaids may often spend more time with the child than the mother does, that the child becomes more favorably conditioned to the nursemaid than to the mother. That illustrates that love is a learned process. As you grew older and began playing with children, You learn to like those whom playing was fun, and you learn to dislike those where your association was marked only by dissatisfaction and unpleasantness. Similarly, if your associations with those of the opposite sex were all marked by unpleasantness and nervous tension, you tended to stick to those of your own sex, but if they were marked with pleasure, you turned more and more to the other sex. Even the appearance of the girl that a young man likes is due to pleasant associations with other persons who had one or more of the characteristics that his girl has. It is not just accident that our girls are more likely to fall in love with boys who have characteristics resembling their own fathers than they are with boys who don't. Similarly, a boy is more likely to fall in love with a girl who resembles his own mother than with a girl who doesn't. If your early life has been marked by strife in the home and tension in your relation with people your own age, then you have been poorly conditioned for the comradeship married love can provide, and you probably will have the greatest difficulty finding happiness in marriage. But if your relationships with people have been relatively serene, you will find it easy to learn to love someone of the opposite sex. You will find that when you do certain things, you receive approval by way of happy smiles and rewards. Gradually, you learn to put your best foot forward. You and your date both are conditioned to be on your best behavior, and if you have many things in common, develop a deep friendship with each other. Then, if the conditioning during the friendship is quite favorable, your mutual feeling of appreciation and affection for each other grows and finally ripens into love. There you have it. In your love for each other, you will both gradually become sexually vibrant, and you both will begin to feel a need for sexual expression through each other. As this need becomes increasingly strong, you both begin to think of engagement and marriage. Ideally, when your need for each other becomes so strong that it can no longer be denied, you are married. Are you really in love? The first thing many counselors like to find out when people come to them about the possibility of marrying is to find out whether they are actually in love. Here are some questions which quickly disclose whether a person is afflicted with the real thing or is just infatuated by good looks and sex appeal. Answer each question truthfully regardless of what you think the correct answer should be. Do you have a great number of things that you like to do together? Do you have a feeling of pride when you compare your friend to any other you have known? Do you feel you need to apologize for certain things about him? Do you suffer from a feeling of unrest when away from him or her? Have you a strong desire to please him or her, and are you quite glad to give way on your own preferences? Do you have any difficulty carrying on a conversation with each other? Even when you quarrel, do you still enjoy being together? Do you actually want to marry this person? Would you be afraid to trust him or her in the presence of another attractive person of your own sex for an evening? Does he or she have the qualities you would like to have in your children? Do your friends and associates mostly admire this person and thinks he or she would be a good match for you? Do you ever wonder if he or she is faithful? Do your parents think you are in love? They are very discerning about such things. Have you started planning, at least in your own mind, what kind of wedding, children, and home you will have? Are you conscious of being jealous of him or her? Is this person attractive to you not only in appearance, but in the way he talks, acts, and thinks? Do you approve generally of each other's friends? Do you wonder if he or she is being sincere in what he tells you? Do you have a wealth of things to discuss and do together? When outside trouble develops for one of you, does the crisis tend to pull you together rather than apart? Are there many things on which you disagree? Do you find that in thinking of the future, it is always in terms of two rather than of yourself alone? Can you imagine how he or she will appear at 40 and still feel as deeply attached to him as before? Do you have serious doubts about your love for him? If you have a perfect score, you answered every third question, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 24, with no, and all of the others with yes. Do you have 20 or more correct answers? If so, we would judge you to be solidly in love. If you did not, you should be skeptical until you receive further proof.